At some point in time, you might have heard about pivot tables, and what I want to do is show you just how to quickly create a simple pivot table in Excel. Now, I'm using a simple set of data here that is just showing us the monthly expenses for a household for 3 months, January, February, and March. And this current data set is just sorted by expenses high to low. And as you can see, the months are a little scrambled here, and so you might encounter in the professional world or personally a set of data that's a little scrambled like this. And if you want to quickly summarize it, a pivot table can really help. So let's say we wanted to summarize just what the monthly expense totals were. Forget about the category or the description, but just by month. So for January, February, and March, what were the total expenses that we shelled out? Now what we can do is select our entire data set here, which is columns A through D, and then what we're going to do is click on Insert, go to Pivot Table, and click this down arrow, and then click Pivot Table. Now you're going to be given some options here, and just for example's sake, I'm going to leave everything selected. We're going to essentially just tell Excel to create this pivot table in a new tab. I'm going to click OK, and you can see this box appears with pivot table in it, and when you've clicked inside of that box, you can see that this pivot table field list appears on the right hand side. Now these field names here should look familiar because they coincide with the headers that appeared in our original data set that's driving this pivot table. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to summarize the monthly totals, and all I need to do that is click on month, select it, and drag it down into row labels. So these months are going to appear in the rows over here in column A. If I wanted to appear in the columns instead, I would just drag this up to column labels, and the month names would appear here in row 4, columns A through C. I'm going to take this back down to the row labels, and then what I'm going to do is click on amount, because we want to total the amounts for each month, and drop it into values. So anything that we want to, any numerical values that we want to summarize are going to go into this values box down here in the lower right. Now by default, when you create a pivot table and add something to the values box, what's going to happen is it's going to by default count them. Well, we don't want to count the number of expenses for each month. What we want to do is summarize what they were. So I'm going to right click after clicking on one of these cells with these count of amounts. I'm going to right click, go to summarize values by, click on sum, and now you can see our expense totals for each month. I'm going to just clean this up a little bit. I'm going to change these numbers to currency since we're dealing with money, and I'm going to remove the decimal places. Now you can see that also by default these blanks are appearing in here. That's because we selected really when we created the pivot table all these blanks, blank cells that appear underneath the data that we had. And that's okay. We can just quickly remove the blanks by clicking on the filter next to row labels, deselecting blank, and hitting OK. And there you have it. We've got a quick summary of our expense totals for our household for January, February, and March.